Call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Before I start with the meeting, I was thinking about all of you out there, and I was thinking what a wonderful evening for a meeting. And we are so glad that you're here, seriously. And I know that some of you will be talking to the board, but it's really energizing to see all of you here. So we'll start with our board priorities, which I would like Director Potts to read if you could.
The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
All right, thank you very much. Director Hayes, would you read our mission and vision statements, please?
Actually, Director Mayfield has it ready.
Oh, okay.
Enhance each student's abilities by providing I should tell you first what it is, the mission statement. Enhance each student's ability by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. Our vision statement: education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next is board reports. Are there any? Director DeSalvo.
I think Director Hayes is probably going where I'm going, but had the honor of attending all of the high school graduations a week ago last Sunday, and it was wonderful to see all those students that graduated from the Davenport Community School District, to see how many talented, all of the kids with robes and all of those that ropes for honoring their accomplishments, and those are the good things. Those are the things that we need to celebrate, because we're doing a lot of wonderful things in this district every single day. And that was just a huge, tremendous showing of their accomplishments. So I'm extremely proud to be part of this district, and extremely proud of all of our 2018 graduates.
Director Hayes.
And elaborating a little bit more on that, I was extremely proud of the fact that the dual grads were separate. There were 52 of them, and all of them were able to have their special moment for their accomplishments, which made me really happy. It's just a proud day. Another moment that moved me was one of the central grads that talked about the Dreamers and DACA, and she actually acknowledged family members and made the statement that some of the parents weren't even able to understand what was going on, but they were there merely in support of their child, and it was just a really touching moment to hear that. Today we had our poverty meeting, and poverty in the past has been an ad hoc meeting, but now, as you're aware, we voted for that to be a standing committee. It's not just a meeting. We actually talk, and there's solutions that come out of it. Our meeting today was really positive. A lot of people discussed some of the plans and things that were going on this summer to help the district, and just everybody's really excited to get going and do something and come back in a couple weeks or a couple months and talk about the things that we're going to do from here. There's been a lot of focus on mental health with the things that's going on in the community right now, and we were discussing, ways that, mental health may have an effect on what's going on, and some different ways to assist with that, and even training that may be required to allow educators to understand and recognize some of the signs of some of the young people requiring additional assistance or counseling or something, to work together as a community to try to help things that not only happen in our district but in our entire community.
Thank you. Any additional board reports? I've got a couple. The graduations are just amazing, and to be able to participate with all of our students and our staff in those events. And we had another graduation that occurred earlier in the week, which was for Mid-City. And I must say it was just absolutely amazing. The students, the families, everybody that was there. And we had the event at Central, but it was every bit as energizing as all of our other graduations. And they're all a little bit different. But the one for Mid-City is a little bit smaller because we have many fewer graduates from Mid-City. But it's a little bit more intimate. We get to talk a little bit more about each student. I just wanted to acknowledge that all 4 of those graduations were just absolutely amazing. The other thing I have to talk about, I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. And it's probably both, and so some may think it's bittersweet. But our CFO, Marcia Tangen, this is her last meeting. And she's been with us for forever. I think she said 37 years. My goodness. It's almost unimaginable. And we have great people coming to follow in her footsteps. But I will say that this is a big district. There are a lot of financial issues, and most of you are aware of some of the challenges that we have or opportunities. But the amount of work that goes into all of this is almost unimaginable. And the integrity that it takes to do this in an appropriate manner with full fidelity is just amazing. And you can imagine, if I recall right, we get about like 1,000 invoices per week or something like that. There's just so much going on. And it affects all of you out there, and it affects our whole district, and it affects our community. And we have counted on Marcia's oversight of our finances for all of this time through various superintendents. And I know that Superintendent Tate has placed a lot of confidence in the work that she must do. But I just wanted to open it up if there are any words on behalf of the board, in spite of the fact that Marcia doesn't really like public attention. But I'd like to open it up because this will be the last time that we have her at a board meeting in this capacity. Director DeSalvo.
Well, I would like to personally thank Marcia. Every time I have a bizarre question, she invites me to come and sit down, and she goes over things with me so thoroughly and accurately. The magnitude of impact that you've had on this district is tremendous. And I think I told her this before, we can fill a seat, but we'll never replace the person. So we thank you for all that you've done for the many years of service here, and wish you all the best in your retirement. Enjoy every moment, and come back and visit us on a Monday night if you have nothing else to do. But thank you for everything. That just doesn't seem to be enough for all that you've done. So thank you.
Thank you for those words. Anybody else? What's that? Oh, she said it? Ditto? Okay. I have a card that I will give you, I'll lick it. So, but Marcia, it's not a lot, but just a few words of our appreciation. I give you a hug. Good. Thank you very much. It almost seems like we should have a whole meeting devoted to just that. If you'd like, I can call one for later this week. But otherwise, we'll keep on moving with our communications. Director Beck, would you read our upcoming events, please?
Gladly. June 12th, tomorrow evening. On Tuesday, we have a public forum, our second one, on the Vision 2020 proposal. It will be at the West High School Auditorium beginning at 6. It's scheduled to go until 7:30. On June 18th, Monday at 5:30 p.m., we have a special committee of the whole meeting in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom, which is here. On June 25th, Monday at 5 p.m., we have a special call open meeting and board training in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom. On June 25th, Monday at 6 p.m., we have our regular meeting in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom. On June 28th, Thursday, from 5 to 7 p.m., there's a special open meeting with the Davenport City Council in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom. July 2nd, Monday at 5:30 p.m., we have a committee of the whole meeting in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom. On July 4th, which is a Wednesday, because of the holiday, the building and the district will be closed. On July 9th, Monday at 6 p.m., we have our regular meeting in the ASC Jim Hester Boardroom. And the third Vision 2020 public forum, the one scheduled for September 12th, is now scheduled for Wednesday, September 5th at 6 p.m. in the North High School Auditorium. And people may also share their thoughts, questions, or concerns at the link, which I believe is feedback@davenportschools.org.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move into open forum. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. The Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. We have 6 open forum requests, and so each of you will have 3 minutes to make your presentation at the open forum. Please come up to the microphone and give us your name and address. And the first 3 I'll read, and then after that I'll read the last 3 and just come up. First is Katerina Bolton. Next is Kerry Dugan. And after that will be Heidi Baining. Did I pronounce that correct? Huh? Benning. Okay, great. So why don't we start with those 3. Katerina?
Hi, Katerina Bolton, 1920 Walling Court, here in Davenport. So I actually went to the special ed symposium today in Des Moines, and just wanted to share some information, just quickly regarding implicit bias, and also regarding a meeting that our PTO group is having June 21st regarding implicit bias and roundtable discussion regarding race. So one of the things that Dr. Rosemarie Allen spoke on was implicit bias and being aware, self-aware is halfway there. So we're hoping that with our meeting on the 21st of June at Fairmont Library at 6 p.m., We'll have a superintendent or principal from Burlington that will be there to discuss some initiatives that he brought forward to help kind of change the culture head on. We'll have some other community leaders there too, talking about race as well, as we're still working out and dealing with the disproportionality of the audit from special ed, and kind of going from that to the letter from the superintendent to the consideration letter to the SBRC regarding school security, which I think, great, that's a good cause, but I think that if we're going to be asking for money, then we should be asking for money to make sure our buildings are compliant with the law, regarding handicap accessibility. Ramps are accessible, that are buttons when you push to come into a school don't work for a deaf person, that they're working for people who cannot hear. If we're going to be asking for money, then we need to be asking for money that can help us come back from this issues that we're having with the audit that show that we're not compliant and we are breaking the law. So I feel that, again, as I know you guys know, my opinions and my what have you oppose some of these things, but strongly, if we're asking for money, we need to be making sure we're complying with the law. If we're going to be asking for money regarding security, not just security, but showing that going into poverty and mental health, how that's impacting students. We're talking about closing schools, so not only are we talking about closing schools, we're talking about those students that were impacting from JB, that now we're going to be impacting from another school that's going to be moving. How is that child's mental health being considered for these kids that are being shuffled around? Not just the children that are being shuffled around, but also the teachers who are going to be shuffled around from the move, and where they're going to be and what position they might have or what they might not have. So I just, again, think that some of these things are sometimes not considered. Sometimes you ask a question and you get an answer, you take it for face value, but I urge you to do your research and to find out what's really going on, because there's more to it. There's always more information that you can be finding out. So I ask that you continue to do your research with other things that are going on and any issues that are being brought forward to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. Next is Kerry Dugan.
Hi, I'm Kerry Dugan, 630 East Colorado Street in Davenport. Like Katerina said, we just got back from the Iowa Department of Education put on the symposium. The Iowa Department of Education feels like it's a really important time right now in Iowa and in our country, that they wanted to kind of present that there's 2 days of education. It's free. They fed us lunch even. There were 1,700 people there. I was hopeful to see any of our leadership there, and we didn't. So we would really encourage you guys to encourage them to get active in what the state's trying to be involved in. I think the state is really trying to improve situations here. So if our leadership would get on board with that, it would really mean a lot to us. When we're talking about poverty, mental health, and things like that, I think we really need to take a second look on how we use our isolation rooms. One of the keynote speaker today touched on isolation rooms, and she said it's something that people sometimes still do. This is something of the past. It's archaic, and we're still doing it to kids of all ages. That directly impacts their mental health. When you lock a child up, it directly impacts their mental health. When you isolate them, it does as well. So I'd really encourage you to get involved in that. Let's get rid of the isolation rooms, treat our people like people. That's all we're asking. Thanks.
Thank you, Kerry. Next is Heidi.
Heidi Benning, 4328 Ridgewood Court of Davenport. Superintendent Tate and members of the school board, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of my husband, TJ Benning, who is the police chief in Buffalo. He is currently out recovering from injuries he sustained on duty. Although I knew the children in Buffalo loved TJ, I didn't know how much he or other law enforcement agents of Buffalo have impacted their lives. I've had mothers reach out from Buffalo Elementary to tell us what a difference it has made in their child's life to have a police officer come to the school once a week to eat with the kids. How they feel safe because they see the patrol car driving by to make sure the kids get to and from school safe. How much their child now respects the law because the policeman joins in at a football game or a basketball game up at the school. They see them as heroes and they want to do good by them. How they want to go to school and do good because if they do, and they tell TJ on Candy Thursday that they've done something good, he rewards them with a treat. We had a mother reach out to us and tell us her husband had passed away and her son had quit trying in school. His grades had slipped and he was giving up. After a call from a concerned teacher at Buffalo Elementary, TJ started talking to the child and he had turned his grades around and his life back around. Unfortunately, Superintendent Tate, I cannot put a monetary value on the aforementioned. What I can tell you, though, is that the children in Buffalo are becoming better citizens who respect the law because of their small elementary school allows them to have police presence in it and builds relationships between the two. This cannot be done in the larger cities because the police departments are just too inundated with calls. I encourage you to allow Buffalo School to stay open and continue to produce well-rounded children who obey the law and not slip through the cracks in a larger school.
Thank you, Heidi. Next, we have Karen. Sheila, Shelby, and Doug Anderson. We'll start with Karen.
Hi, Karen Gordon, 2415 North Fairmount Street in Davenport. Tonight I'm asking you to please vote no to the proposed bell time changes. I realize that most of you were not on the board when the district changed bell times just 4 short years ago, despite community opposition. I hope that you will be more receptive in your consideration of the voices you've heard regarding this current bell proposal. I fear that the bell time discussion has been rushed, not to mention kind of hastily swept under the rug in the midst of the bigger discussions of Vision 2020, and that's sneaky and unfortunate. For many Davenport parents, if this is approved, it will be the second schedule disruption in a relatively short amount of time. Perhaps it doesn't seem like a big deal, but to working parents, students, and employees, it absolutely is. My biggest issue is with the middle school changes. I currently work as a campus supervisor at Smart Intermediate. My schedule brings me to work an hour before the student day begins and keeps me there 40 minutes afterwards. I clock out currently at 4:15. If this change takes effect, I will be going to work at 8:10 in the morning and leaving at 4:40. I assume most other campus supervisors are on similar schedules, as are office secretaries, juvenile court liaisons, student support liaisons, and several others. Some of these folks have an even later contract time than myself. That said, I have problems with this proposed schedule change as an employee, a parent, and as an advocate for all of my students. Personally, I have a medical issue that requires me to travel to East Davenport once a week for doctor visits. The doctor's office has pretty normal business hours, closing at 5 o'clock on all but one day of the work week. They do not have weekend hours. Of course, my family has other regularly scheduled activities, so I'm often unable to go the one day of later office hours. As the school bell schedule currently stands, I can leave work at 4:15, go straight to the doctor, and arrive by 4:35, finish up by 5, and leave with the doctor and nurses. If the bell schedule is approved, I will have to use health leave every week for this mandatory doctor visit. I will use up around 36 hours of my leave by the end of the year just on this one recurring appointment. I know I'm not the only school employee who has concerns of this nature. As a parent, I have a middle school student who will be in 7th grade at Williams next year. This means he will finally have the opportunity to play school sports. In the past, most middle school games start at 4:30 p.m., 55 minutes after the end of the school day. Would this mean that next year middle school games wouldn't start until 4:55? Or would they still start at 4:30 in order to compete against Bettendorf, PV, North Scott, and Muscatine, meaning a lot more missed class time and schoolwork? As a parent, that's a lose-lose situation. I don't want my child or any child missing class time for sports, but I don't want to crush his athletic spirit and have him miss out on the training that middle school sports offers before it gets truly competitive in high school. If games are pushed back to a start time of closer to 5 p.m., that's further delaying the dinner, homework, evening ritual for all of the students and their families. You may present private school or travel teams as an option. I can't afford that. Neither can most families in Davenport. As an advocate for my students, one issue is that many of my middle school students arrive earlier than I do at 7:45 in the morning. Some of them go to stepping stones, which, as a side note, I wonder how the bell changes will affect that program. But several of them don't and are wandering around circling the building for an hour or more before their classes start. We open the doors for breakfast at 8:20, and it is a stampede. These are kids who are very obviously hungry. They don't receive regular meals at home. With a proposed bell time change, they would have to wait another half hour for breakfast. I know to those of us who haven't ever had to worry about when and where our next meal would be, a half hour seems like nothing. But for students who haven't had anything to eat since they left school the day before, a half hour is going to feel like a very long time. I also worry about my students because many of them are walkers. In the winter, it will be nearly dark already by the time the last bell rings for the day, and they'll be walking home in that darkness. I know that middle schoolers like to act like they're tough and they have no fear, but the truth is they are children. They are just as nervous as everyone else walking alone in the dark through neighborhoods that don't always offer the safety and protection that children deserve. I hope you will take these concerns into consideration before you vote this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Next is Shelby Buchanan.
I'm Shelby Buchanan, and I live in 902 Franklin Street in Buffalo, Iowa. And I'm here to address to you of the fact that Buffalo Elementary School is on the chopping block. When I heard that my elementary school might be closing, I was really upset. Not because of the fact that it was my school, but because of the fact that many kids in that town wouldn't be as fortunate as me and be able to attend the school that I got. I got to attend Buffalo School preschool through 5th grade, which was back when they had the preschool program. I quickly became friends with the staff and other students there. Since it was a small community, and still is, I already knew some of the people there, which made me feel really comfortable starting out school for the first time. The biggest thing that I loved about Buffalo School was the STEAM Lab. I got to experience it the first year they put it in, and sadly it was my last year at Buffalo School. When they opened the STEAM Lab, it was a big shocker to every student there. We didn't know about it until it really opened. Rumors spread quickly throughout the school, and we soon started to look into STEAM labs in our free time. We found out that STEAM was science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and everybody got excited because it included one of their favorite things. When soon attention came to Buffalo School because they are the first city in the country to incorporate virtual reality into the next generation science standards curriculum, the Quad City Times reported. They received a grant from Bechtel Trust, which will help pay the school to use virtual headsets. I was one of the very few 3 students that got to test that virtual headsets, and it opened my eyes to the wonderful world of engineering. Buffalo School rewarded you when you were good and showed you the right path when you were wrong. This pushed me to get better grades, and I graduated the 6th grade year, my first year in middle school, with the Academic Excellence Award. Moving back to the fact that it opened my eyes to engineering, I realized that when I grew up, I wanted to be an engineer. Now you must be thinking, kids change their minds all the time about what they want to be when they grow up. And you're correct about that. I've changed my mind from coding to animation to video game design to robotics and back to coding because, I'm a kid and I changed my mind. And all those things have one thing in common. They all fall under engineering. Buffalo School opened my eyes to what engineering can be, and it inspired me to grow up and pursue that career. It pushed me to get the best grades, and it pushed everybody else. When the STEAM Lab opened, other kids who enjoyed sports more than learning started to look into art and math and other things that the STEAM Lab offered. If you close Buffalo School, I want to know what happens to the STEAM Lab. It opened on my first year, and I worry about it because if you close Buffalo School, not a lot of other schools have STEAM labs and the opportunity to learn about STEAM like I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby. And next is Doug Anderson.
My name's Doug Anderson. I live at 717 Infield Drive in Buffalo, and I'm the mayor of Buffalo. I've got a quick little thing I'd like to read to you. Buffalo School has been put on the list to be closed. The city of Buffalo, the citizens, and the students do not understand why. Buffalo is the newest school in the district. The school came in second in the district for education. The STEAM program, which is the only one in the district, has given the students, Shelby said it perfectly, a reason to care about their future careers. Buffalo School has an outstanding faculty that would do anything for their students and our town. As far as your concerns with safety, Buffalo has the best police, fire, and EMS protection you can have. Buffalo School is the heart of this town. Closing it would be devastating to our community. Back in, I do believe it was January of 2013, myself and the council, we had a light bulb go off. We didn't have a community development committee, so we started one. And that first month, the council, myself, and a couple of the members we got to join, we asked to write down the 10 things that you thought were the best assets for this town that would bring people in, have them stay, and then after we did that, we made it into a survey that we sent out to the town. We gave them about, I think, a month or 2 months for everything to come back in, and believe it or not, Buffalo School is our biggest asset. They don't want to lose it, so I don't want to lose it. Just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And absolutely sincerely on behalf of the whole board, I want to thank all of you that spoke tonight. Katerina, Kerry, Heidi, Karen, Doug, and especially Shelby. That took a lot of fortitude to get up here and talk to a board like this, and you were incredibly articulate, and I wanted to especially appreciate that. Students coming and talk are very important to the board. All of you are important to the board, and thank you very much for bringing those things to our attention, and your passion. Everything is really important, so thanks again. We'll move on with the consent agenda. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? And I should have mentioned for all of you, we have our director, Goses, participating by phone in this meeting. Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of bills?
Mr. President,
Director DeSalvo.
I move that the board approve the following recommendation from administration for adoption of the bills from the bill listing periods of May 24th, 2018 through June 6th, 2018. Resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of May 24th, 2018 through June 6th, 2018.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Is there a superintendent report?
Yes, Mr. President. I want to catch up on some of the highlights, although school is closed and students are gone. Back in May, we announced that Central's Leah Grady was crowned the champion state track and field and discus. Wood Intermediate School on May 19th sent 128 students to Six Flags where they have competitions. There are over 1,000 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade students. And Wood 7th and 8th grade men's choir got the best overall choir. They also got 5 first places and 1 second place. Mid-City and Central students have come together to put together mental health training for our faculty. In fact, it was their idea to do it. They are working with our experts in the district, and what we're going to do is begin training our faculty and employees over the summer. So it's a great initiative on their part. And reminder that we had a 15-year-old graduate from West High School, Michael Belenko. Samantha Sparrow, a Keystone staff member, was honored by the State of Iowa Midwest Region National School Nutrition Association as Employee of the Year in Iowa. The Smart Intermediate Choir won the first place trophy at the Six Flags Great American Music in Music in the Parks Festival. So again, a reminder, students are gone, but a lot of great things were happening. I'm going to ask Marcia to give us an update, probably her last, on recent budget impacts. The importance of this is when we have been talking about 2020, Vision 2020, I've indicated there will be changes up and down. We'll have some good news and we'll have some challenges, and this is one of the challenges that we have, and she'll explain. And the next place that we'll actually look and see how things are is when we do the budget report at the end of this year. So the June 30th, during the summer we look and see, and hopefully we will have money left over. But I want Marcia to explain this to you because we have to keep it in mind as we continue to look at our reductions that we have to make. Marcia?
There are two things recently that have happened that will impact our budget. The first is the state approving our budget. Once the board approves the budget, it goes to the state. It goes to the Department of Management. They look it over, and about this time every year they send it back to us and let us know if there have been changes, if estimates have been changed, what have you. Just about every year our tax levy changes. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. This year the tax levy was going to go up, and the reason for that is because there have been some changes to how much in our property tax levy was going to bring us. One change is that the property tax levy itself was actually going to bring in $208,000 more than what we had certified, and that's due to an adjustment the state made. There's a couple areas where they have to estimate a percentage, and they wait for all the budgets to come in, they wait for the state budget to be approved, and then they send it back to us and tell us where that estimate comes in. And in one area it came up, in one area it came down. So the tax levy amount was actually going to go up, but then our state foundation aid was going to go down. And then, of course, as we were expecting, the state did not fund the instructional support levy, which was about $500,000. They included it in their budget because at the time the state hasn't certified their budget, and so it's still in their budget that they will make their contribution to the instructional support levy. All over the past probably 5 to 8 years, they've not done that. It's come in at zero. So all of those changes that they sent us is an adjustment of $1.1 million to our negative. The bottom line impact, though, is only going to be $568,000 because that $1.1 million number included an adjustment to the AEA. And since that is flow-through money, in other words, they give us the revenue, we also have the expense, there's a zero impact to Davenport. So by the change that the state is making, our funding is going to decrease by $568,000. We had the opportunity to go with the higher levy rate that they returned back to us. That's an option that we could have gone with. In speaking with Dr. Tate, we felt that the board was in agreement when they passed the budget that they wanted to keep with the levy rate that we had because it was a reduction from previous years. We didn't want it to go back up, so we sent them the word that we wanted our budget to be back where we had originally approved it, and it will stay there, so there will not be an increase in our tax levy rate from what the board had certified. In order to do that, we are decreasing our our cash reserve levy by $208,000. That's not really going to impact us because that levy does not carry spending authority. That is money that would just go in our reserves. So the fact that we had to reduce that levy to maintain our property tax just means it's that much that won't go in our reserves, and currently we have like $18 million in our reserves, so that's not really an impact that we're concerned about. But the bottom line is that $568,000 for next year is also spending authority that we will lose. So that's a direct impact on next year's budget. The second area that's going to have an impact is the special education audit. And that is going to have an impact not only for this current budget year, but for then every budget year going forward unless changes are made. As a result of the audit, there were several positions that were identified that were not coded correctly according to the state as to how they wanted those positions coded. Some positions were coded 100% to special ed, but because that classroom teacher had gen ed students in their classroom, they said you can't do it 100%. It had to be a 60-40 split. So they said that it was retroactive, so we had to do it for this year. So by the time we made all of those changes, that came out to almost $700,000. That's an impact to this year's budget. And again, that is spending authority tied with that. So the total impact of those two adjustments is about $1.2 million. And that will have a negative impact on our budget and a negative impact on the spending authority that we were hoping to turn around.
Yeah, I was going to allow questions. Did you have anything else? Okay. This is not a discussion item, but there are a lot of complex issues here. So I would open it up to discussion. Director Beck.
Could you please explain the line, since since the changes have increased our property taxes by $208,528, our levy rate is set to increase, but we have the option to reduce it back to the amount that the board certified.
Right. We went back to the amount the board certified, and so because we were taking away that much of the tax levy, we had to reduce the amount that we were levying in our cash reserve. So we reduced that by $208,000. So the amount of taxes overall that we were levying was going to come down.
And may I ask a follow-up? What would happen if the board chose to increase the levy? Where would that money go, and what impact would that have?
We actually had to give notice to the Department of Management by last Friday. It was one of those quick turnaround items, and so we felt that the board had a strong enough opinion on keeping the tax levy where it was at and not increasing it. That's the decision that we made with the state. If we would have decided to go ahead and take the increase, it would not have impacted the amount that we levied. It's because of the mix of state aid and property tax, the levy itself would have gone up, but we would not have gotten any additional cash.
Could you please explain that a little bit further? Sorry, I'm not a money
no, that's
person.
fine. Because of the mix of state aid and property tax in how they determine our funding, because the state aid was going down in one part, then the property tax had to make up for that. And so that's where the amount of the levy itself got impacted, but because the dollar amount didn't change, it was just a mix of who was paying for it, the state aid or the property tax. That's why the levy rate had to go up.
Thank you.
Director DeSalvo.
And just for those in the audience, that's called budget guarantee. This is an election year, and in the fall, when you go to the polls, think about who you're putting into office, because they're not giving us the funding appropriately. So it's coming out of our taxpayer dollars with budget guarantee. So when the state doesn't give us enough money to support our schools, then the state automatically increases that levy to offset what they haven't given us. It comes right out of our hands. So please consider who you're voting for this fall. I just wanted to clarify that budget guarantee, and then I do have another question.
Sure, go ahead.
Or just maybe a clarification. So, Marcia, when you talked about the reserve, so the monies that go in reserve we can't touch. So we have $18 million in the bank, and we can continue to fund that and put more money in there by increasing taxes, but we can't spend it. We don't have the authority to do so. It's incredibly frustrating. So the state gives us that authority. Well, they really don't give us the authority. It has to sit there. So I know it seems troubling when we're talking about closing a school and we have $18 million in the bank. We can't touch it. The state won't allow it. So again, there's a problem. We need to talk to our legislators. We need that authority. We're going to talk in a little bit about getting authority to spend money for security in our schools. We want to dig into that rainy day fund to make our schools so more secure. So these are problems that we have with these formulas. They're incredibly complicated, and ultimately as taxpayers we need to be as educated as we possibly can about the decisions that we're making, because they're very important. The special ed money, that's coming out of general fund.
Correct.
So the additional money that, as a result of the audit with the positions not being coded correctly, that money comes out of the general fund. That is the money that we're trying to save. That is the money that pays for teacher salaries. That's the money that pays for books. That's the fund that that we're not funded equally. So our neighbors and surrounding communities get more money per student than we do. And that's the fund that is our problem right now, that we're desperately trying to get more money for. That's what's putting us in these awful budget positions right now, because we're not funded equally. And so we just got hit again with this audit that's going to cost us nearly $700,000 out of that general fund that we didn't have in a budget. So now we're going to have to figure out what's going to give. We had an additional $700,000 unexpected, kind of like when your furnace breaks and you're not planning on spending $1,200 for a new furnace. Same concept. We're not planning on spending this money, and now we're going to have to. So.
Yeah, excuse me. I've got to maintain control here. So,
I'm finished. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Any additional discussion on this?
I understand, if I may.
Yeah.
I understand that for next year, it's 700,000, or what about, is there such a thing as arrears, meaning the monies that we spent last year or received? Is that basically make up the $700,000 that has to be spent next year? Or is it the teachers that have to be funded that we have to come up with for next year?
These are all tied to salaries. So the amount that is listed here is money that we have to come up with for this year. It wasn't only teachers. There were some campus security positions, some crisis interventionists, but we have to come up with that money this year to cover those positions.
So we do not have to pay any money back for misappropriation last year?
No. No.
That's what I was asking.
Right. No, correct.
Okay.
Any additional discussion or questions? The one thing I'm wondering, Marcia, and I don't know if you can answer it simply, but what is the impact of all of this, especially the special education section, on our SBRC meeting that will be occurring later this fall?
At that meeting, they are expecting us to provide them a update or a progress report on where we're at with our Vision 2020 plan. And at that, I believe at the time that we did the report prior, back in March, we had indicated that plan did not take into consideration any results from the audit. So we kind of put a placeholder in there, letting them know that we knew that there were going to be probably some financial impact, but we didn't know what. So now, as part of that progress report, we will tell them, you know, we had this impact come to the budget. We didn't know at the time what the dollar amount is, but now we can tell them it was almost $700,000. So that set us back for what we thought our goal we were going to hit for this year by what that amount is.
So that's kind of what I was wondering, and I'm thinking, well, are they going to say, well, then go back to the drawing board again? You know, understanding that here's the plan that you made, but now because of these other things, you're off by $700,000. So we aren't going to, and I know you can't predict what they're going to say, but if you were guessing, what do you think they're going to do?
There may be other areas where we provided estimates of savings for fiscal 18 that we may have exceeded. So we will go back in those certain areas because they want to know, can we tell them exactly what we saved for early retirement? So we'll go back position by position and give them a total of the exact dollar amounts. We know this person left, we know this person replaced, and what was the savings in salaries. We gave them an estimate in our plan, but now they want us to come back and see if we can give them actual numbers. And I think by providing some of those actual numbers, we'll come out better than what we had provided them. So we may not see the full impact of the $700,000.
Yeah, and I'm thinking you probably won't be there with us when
Nope.
when we make that presentation. I was just thinking on that one lady's insistence that we were overusing the insurance holiday, and that seemed to be a real sticking point. Do you think we can get by that with the plans that you have provided?
I do. We've already had a conversation with somebody from the SBRC, in fact, just last week, and verbally gave them an update on where we're at. And so we feel pretty comfortable that what we're going to be providing them is what they're looking for.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other discussion or questions, Director DeSalvo?
I just want to clarify one thing let me read this and let me be clear. Special Education Audit 2017 through 18 budget. As a result of the special education audit, several positions were identified as being inappropriately funded by special education. 16 special education teachers that now need to have 40% of their cost paid by the general fund. So meaning we were paying them out of special education budget. They were helping special education students. They told us no, to pay them out of a different bucket. There were 2 crisis interventionists that serve both special ed and regular ed students and need to have 40% of their costs paid by the general fund. There are 3 campus security positions currently funded by special ed that need to be funded by general ed. So these were all positions that we're paying out of special ed that we now need to pay out of general ed, part of their salary, not all of it. So we weren't violating a law, we were paying them out of a different bucket, and now we're going to change that, so it's going to impact that general fund budget.
Is there any additional
I'm done.
discussion or question?
Clarify that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Superintendent Tate. Move on to other items requiring action. May I have motion regarding approval of bell time schedules?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I recommend I move that the board approve the proposed bell times with start times and end times as following. Davenport Community School District Elementary Schools, excluding Bluegrass Elementary, starts at 8 a.m. and at 2:50 p.m. Assumption High School start at 7:25 and at 2:30. GFK Catholic School K-8 start at 7:25 and at 2:40 p.m. Trinity Lutheran School start at 7:35 and at 2:35. Children's Village Preschool start at 8 a.m. and at 2 p.m. Keystone Academy start at 8:25 and at 2:40. All Saints Catholic Schools K-8 start at 7:40 and at 2:30. St. Paul's the Apostles Catholic Schools K-8 start at 7:45 and at 2:55. Davenport Community School District High School start at 8:35 and at 3:25. Davenport Community School District Intermediate Schools, including Walcott K-8, start at 9:10 and end at 4 o'clock. Bluegrass Elementary start at 9:10 and at 4 p.m.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Beck.
I have a lot of concerns, particularly about the intermediate schools, including Walcott and Bluegrass, starting at 9:10. We've heard a lot of feedback from the public, and as a parent who has to be at work by 8 a.m. most days of the week, I can foresee this being an issue on a personal level. I'm not as concerned about the late out time, although many people are, as the start time. We've been told that students can get into the building about 20 minutes before bell time for breakfast, but I would like to know the feasibility of providing, for example, stepping stone services in the morning. That would alleviate a lot of my concerns so that parents who have a child, say, at an elementary school and at an intermediate school wouldn't have an hour between, or more than an hour between start times. And I know Stepping Stones is a separate entity, so we wouldn't necessarily, it's fee-based, we wouldn't necessarily be paying for it. I guess I'd like to know the feasibility of providing some sort of before care to alleviate some of these concerns.
And you mainly are talking about the 9-10 start times for the intermediate and Bluegrass Elementary?
Mainly, but I can see it being potentially an issue at some of our elementary schools as well. As it is now, for example, I can drop my son off and I just make it to work in time to start class at 8 a.m. But it's, you know, it's not that huge of a difference. A lot of people could probably find a workaround, but so the main issue would be the intermediates and but also the elementaries, I guess, would be secondary is what I'm trying to say.
So it is a separate entity, and I don't know if Rachel Steiner would feel comfortable coming up and talking in general about how we form a customer base and how stepping stones might work in these situations. I know she's talked a little bit about it, and we can't guarantee anything. We just tell you just in general, here's how it works.
That would be great.
Yes, Stepping Stones is a collaboration between the school district, ISU Extension, and City Parks and Rec. We have been in pretty serious conversations about Bluegrass. It's very likely, if we can get to an enrollment of 15 or more, that services could be offered at Bluegrass. The intermediates and the thought of going to every intermediate would be more challenging. Currently, SMART is under a 21st Century grant, so that allows us to staff that program through those funds. The bigger challenge would be around staffing for a 1-hour program in the morning. So intermediates would be very challenging to bring on.
So given that it's fee-based, though, wouldn't that offset some of the cost of staff?
Yes, it's more an issue of identifying staff that are willing to work an hour a day. The majority of staff are either teachers that are staffing the after-school programs, parks employees, and we just have difficulty identifying folks that want to put in an hour in a morning.
Right. I know, I mean, would high school students be an option? Hiring, I know there would be support staff, not the main supervisor at something like that. But, you know, although given our situation, they'd be starting school before.
School, right. Right, yeah.
Okay. I guess if so, the program's already running at SMART, you said?
Mm-hmm.
And so that leaves, and at Bluegrass, it's very likely.
It's very likely. If we can get to enrollment of 15,
okay,
a program would be offered there.
Because that is pretty late for elementary.
Yeah.
And then, so we would essentially have 2 intermediate schools and Walcott that would need.
That would be without.
Oh, that would be without, but it's potentially possible, maybe.
We'd have to have more discussion about it. I mean, if there were options for partnering, for example, with the school and the start time for teachers, or we would have to have a lot of conversation about having some sort of a built-in staff option, because the program assistants and staffing through Parks and Rec would be very unlikely for an hour a day.
Right. So essentially, we'd be relying on a teacher or a para, somebody who's already at the school, to agree to work an extra hour.
We'd have to have that conversation because the issue becomes like duty, and then they're in overtime, and it's so there would have to be considerable amount of work to explore that model.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Director DeSalvo.
I also have concerns with the intermediate start time being so late. 2 things that I would request that if this plan is approved tonight, I would like follow-up to see that the savings are there and how they're accomplished. I know we're eliminating bus routes, but we don't really know what those routes will be, so if there would be some way that we could track some of those results, that would be very helpful. And then I would like to reconsider this plan again. I know it's painful and it's very difficult, but I'm struggling with, we've got 5 parochial schools that are basically getting their time bumped back. And our students are getting time moved forward. And I don't know what is the best in everybody's situation. Obviously, we can't accomplish all of that, but I wonder if those could be flipped. There's 5 routes for parochial and 6 for intermediate. I don't know if we could consider flipping that in some way. I know it's very late in the game, and I know we have to get this in, but those are just my concerns.
Additional discussion. I've got a couple of questions regarding Director DeSalvo. You said 2 things, and I was wondering a little bit more what you meant. One was reconsidering, which it sounds like what you're suggesting is that the decision be reconsidered sometime in the future at some indeterminate time. Is that correct?
No, that's not what I meant. I meant if we need to vote on this tonight, obviously. We need to get this through or not, whatever we decide tonight. But then before the start of next school year, can we revisit and see how effective this has been? What have the impacts been to our staff and to our students? I know changing bell times is a very difficult process for everybody. But a year from now, if things aren't working the way we anticipated, I think we should revisit.
Okay, but you're saying a year from now, not this coming summer.
Correct.
After a decision, then we go ahead and change it.
I'm saying a year from now.
Okay. And you're just saying that you'd want a report of some sort?
Yeah, I would just like to see how successful it was, what our issues are, what the impacts to our students and our families are, and if those are significant enough, do we need to go down this path again? And
then you talked about flipping, which seemed to be suggesting that we flip some of our district schools with some of the private schools. Is that a recommendation that you would do now before the bell time, or what are you thinking there?
Again, I would like that considered if we revisit this, because it feels like we're doing an awful lot for our parochial schools and trying to accommodate their needs, and I hope we did the same for ourselves. I know that there was a lot of discussion there. But I know the routes are different. It's dependent upon where the students live. I understand all of that. But it all of their time seemed to go back and ours went the other way, and I just would like to look more at that in the future.
Is there more discussion? Go ahead, Superintendent Tate.
Reading all the messages, it seemed like that the parochial schools were as unhappy as everybody else because they like to be where they are. So I don't think we didn't accommodate them. We had meeting after meeting after meeting with them. One of the favorable things that I see is the elementary schools moving back, talking about children going to school in the dark. They were moving at 8 o'clock will help a little bit for them. But again, it seemed like everybody was equally unhappy with it.
Any additional discussion? Yeah, I would certainly agree. The comments that I got seemed to be, I probably got more comments from the parochial schools complaining about the changes than I did from the from our district schools. One of the things I was curious about, if you have a sense for either how many bus routes or how many students are bused as a number or as a percentage to all of the elementary schools. Is that a number that's easy to just guess at, or is that just ridiculous to ask?
It's ridiculous to ask me. Mr. Maloney, I don't know if you have any, you can give a swag.
I don't have a recollection.
Okay. That's fine. except could you at least characterize it as around something, like a swag, is it more like 25% or more like 75%?
Of elementary
Yes,
students?
of elementary.
I think more like half.
50%. Okay, that's good enough. I was just curious about that. And that's to all elementaries, parochial and district elementary schools.
I would say so, and
Okay.
that is with the board policy 1.5 miles as opposed to the state maximum of 2 miles.
Right, and we're maintaining that 1.5 miles.
We are
The
maintaining
way
that.
that you've set it up.
Yes. All of our existing performance criteria were to stay the same.
Yep, okay, it's good enough. Director DeSalvo.
I'm sorry, I have one more question, and it will be for Mr. Maloney. Last time we discussed this, we talked about when a parent signs up for a bus route, and they may not take that route, but they want that security to know if we're running late in the morning, I can get them on the bus and they can still get to school. Then that route has to be held for the entire year. Is that correct?
Yes, unless they notify us.
They
that-
revoke it.
Yes.
Is there any way that we could monitor that and say, 1/10 of this school year you actually rode the bus so far, so we're going to not hold that space for you anymore?
Yes, we do count
Okay.
the ridership, and we are overbooking, as we had
That's what we
mentioned
talked
before.
about. So that's how you can overbook, because you are eliminating some that don't take advantage of the routes they agreed to.
We're guessing that they won't, yes.
Okay. Are they contacted, or you just, when they are not there, they're not there?
We don't contact them.
Okay.
Unless a student is at a stop and it's the only student at that stop and the student is not there for days and days, we contact them and say,
What's going on?
do we still need to stop?
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Director Gosa, do you have anything before we vote?
No.
All right. If there's no additional discussion, I'll call for the vote. And this is the vote for the approval of the bell time schedules as presented by the administration. Director Hayes.
This is an extremely difficult decision for me, and my vote is based primarily on safety issues for the elementary schools. Because I've actually seen small people out on corners at 6:30, and it literally just broke my heart. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to vote yes on this.
Director Potts. Yes. Director Beck.
I have the same concerns, but it's it's the middle schools, I guess. From in my mind, being out earlier is better than being in the dark later. The way I've always thought about it, and based on the concerns that we've heard from the public, no one's happy. No one's going to be happy, whatever we do. But I just can't, in good faith, look at a start time that's this late. And so I'm going to have to vote no.
Director Mayfield.
Because I'm sort of on both ends. I have a problem with some of the long routes that some of our kids have to take to get to school in the dark, as we've had with kids up in this area going down to Smart, which I commented on at that time. And on the other end, getting out a little later and being dark. But at the same time, I know that something has to be done savings-wise. I hope that it's worth it, savings, in order to put these kids, what I say is in potential danger when we're talking about darkness. One of the things that I realized when we had board members walk this route from JB to Sudlow, when the question was asked of them if they would allow their kids to walk it, the answer was no. Of course, they probably have the means to carry their kids to SMART. But again, we're in a financial crunch, and I don't like the idea of kids having to, whether it's take the bus or whatever it is, at that late at night. But I'm going to vote for it because of this situation that we're in. We have to make cuts somewhere. And I'd rather it be an inconvenience with the busing than closing schools. So I'm going to vote yes.
Director DeSalvo.
I have to agree with Director Mayfield in that I don't think this plan is ideal. I have great concerns with what we're doing to our intermediate students, and I am strongly asking that we look at the impacts of this plan if it passes to what have we seen the savings that we're thinking we're going to see, and I want to hear the impacts to our students and our staff. I don't like the plan, but I don't like the situation we're in. We're struggling with our budget, and I don't really feel we have much of a choice. We have to make cuts somewhere, as Director Mayfield said. I would rather do this than have to close a school. But I really want to know the numbers. I want to see the results that this is going to help those budget numbers that we've been shared with. For that reason, I will support it. So my vote is yes.
Director Gosa.
No.
I think it's pretty obvious none of us are really keen on this. I wanted to make sure because two board members said, kind of suggested that it's this or closing a school, and I don't think that's quite what was intended in your discussions, but it just kind of sounded like that, and I think that this is just another part of our 2020 plan. I vote yes. The motion carries. May I have a motion regarding approval for vision insurance renewal?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve renewing the contract with VSP Vision Service Plan for another 3 years.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
Do we cover 100% of this for staff, or do they pay as part of their, do they pay for their share of the insurance?
We cover single insurance depending on bargaining unit and whether or not that's been bargained for. But if it's single plus one or family, then the cost is that of the employee.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? All right. Call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding award of bid for West EEM 14 and 17?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move that the board approve the West EEM 14 and 17 air handling unit upgrade projects to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder, Reagan Mechanical, in the amount of $274,550.
Thank you. Is there a second? Is there any discussion? Okay, call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Potts. Director Beck.
Yes.
Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding consideration of a letter to the SBRC?
Mr. President?
Director Potts.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the letter to the School Board Review Committee, SBRC, asking for a special meeting to consider emergency approval to fund personnel for security, for a security safety net.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And I just wanted to clarify, it's School Budget Review Committee. I think that's what you intended.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Superintendent Tate, do you want to talk about that at all?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, why don't you?
So I've been working since late spring to try to get the legislature, before they adjourn, to provide legislation to allow us to use our reserve funds to hire security personnel. We have money put aside in the SAVE funds, which we are using to harden our buildings. That has been ongoing for years. I have a threat committee now that meets, and they have agreed with the need for additional personnel. And going with the letter is just a general list for consideration, and what we're looking for is money to hire a district level security and student outreach specialist, which would divide their time between doing the research, looking for best practices, working with our schools to make sure that they are doing their knowledge training and their drills, but also half of that would be outreach to our students, because they're our greatest asset. They're the ones that know what's going on, and we need some personal contact. So that person would also coordinate that. Also, 2 additional school resource officers to bring us to a total of 6. We had 2. We're adding 2 more this year, as you know, and then getting 2 more for our schools, which could cover all our schools, with primary emphasis on the intermediate and the high schools. And then an additional 18 school security monitors. We have monitors in the intermediate and high schools, and I want one in every one of our schools. So essentially, that's what we'd be looking for, and to do that, we would need spending authority to use our reserves. So this letter requests on your behalf that we have a special meeting of the School Budget Review Committee to do that. So we're not asking for permission that Dr. Wise would give us that permission. We'd have to go before the School Budget Review Committee, make our case, and then see if they would approve that.
Any questions for the superintendent? All right. We'll call for the vote. Director Potts.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of the superintendent letter of retirement?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the superintendent's letter of retirement effective June 30th, 2019.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director DeSalvo.
I don't want to approve that. Dr. Tate, you have done many good things for our district, and you will, like Marcia, like I said, we can fill a seat, but we can't replace the person or the special things that you've done for this district over the many years, and I really don't want to approve this. What if we say no? I'm kidding, but thank you for your many, many years of service. We'll continue to celebrate you for the next year, but this is a very hard decision for all of us that we have to just figure out how we're going to move on. But thank you. We greatly appreciate you.
Any additional discussion? Yeah, I've had mixed feelings as I've thought about this also, and I've thought, well, you know, it's kind of his choice. And I think being respectful of what he wants to do with his future and thinking about how important that is. Although I've had this sense that he'd like to just stay here, like for forever with us, you know, and so I'm sure, yeah, there'll be plenty of time for discussion down the road. But my goodness, it's been a cool, great run, and I have the highest regard for you, Art, and for everything that you do, and I think it's appropriate to honor your request, or it's not even a request, it's a statement, I guess. So I'll leave it at that for now. Any other discussion? Okay, we will call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Beck.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director Potts.
Yes.
Director DeSalvo.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you for that. We only have one discussion item this evening. It's the long-range facility plan process. So I'm here to lead the discussion. Mr. Maloney, it's most likely that it'll focus on things that you'll want to answer. So I'll start the discussion because this gets to our 10-year plan. And at our recent meeting, we discussed the construction process, but this 10-year process is something that I wanted to open up for a number of reasons. And as we discuss the 10-year plan and the ramifications, I think, that the 10-year plan has to our whole community, I think is important, and to every school, to almost every person in our district. And so we make these plans, and then we make decisions on schools and things like that that I think are made mostly, like a closing of a school is made mostly independent of the decisions that we've taken for the past 10 years in the long-range plan. Maybe.
Well, the long-range plan consists of several elements, the first of which is enrollment projections. I don't recall the 6 or 7 different elements in their particular order, but it starts with enrollment projections and enrollment capacity. It's followed then by the existing condition of our buildings and so forth across the district. That followed by plans that the board has set as priorities for different things. In 2009, the board determined that it would be appropriate to prioritize the long-range plan around air conditioning classrooms. And that became a priority for several years, and that drove the plan, along with many other things. We still replaced roofs, and we still did some other building improvement projects and other things that were necessary, but there was a priority established then to air-conditioned classrooms. That was followed by a decision that we needed to bring Central High School's pool and auditorium up to the standard of the other schools. And by 2014 or so, that was the priority, along with many other things, but that became a major focus. Since then, we have had direction a little over 2 years ago now to really focus on energy efficiency and lower the cost of our general fund utilities expenditures, and that has been a priority along with a number of other things. There is a list of priorities that is also a part of the long-range plan that starts with safety and so forth as one of the highest priorities, and below each of those priorities, there's some discussion of what each of them means. So safety and security is one. Bringing our schools up to our current ed specs is one. Part of the plan is the definition of our education specifications. That is, what are the requirements that we should have at each elementary school, at each intermediate school, at each high school. And so there's a series of priorities, a series of ed specs, and so forth that guide the selection, scheduling, and sequencing of projects. The long-range facility plan leadership team, then made up of district administration, representing all departments in the district, recommends to the board periodically the 10-year project list. We have said before that projects on that list may be moved around according to changes in funding or changes in board priorities. Most recently, we have determined that we need to increase expenditures on schools building physical security. That resulted in $800,000 in hardening projects that are to be complete by August. And we are currently studying what it will take to complete the access controls that are currently underway. Beyond the main entries, we expect that's going to be something in excess of $2 million, and that will require some reprioritization of the entire 10-year plan in order to be able to make that happen sooner than later, because that expenditure had not previously been prioritized. It was going to be a much, much longer implementation of those particular improvements. And so you make choices year to year about changes in priorities and projects. The other major set of projects that still is reflected in the 10-year plan is to add the multi-purpose rooms at each of the elementary schools so that we no longer have dining in the basement and ADA accessibility issues in some schools to the basement where the dining halls are in elementary schools. Those are still in the plan. They were pushed out a couple of years in order to insert the energy efficiency measures work that currently is reflected over the next two coming fiscal years. So I've kind of meandered there because I didn't come with prepared remarks, but generally that's kind of what's in the plan and what the process is of how the plan is updated, amended, and so forth to meet the board's priorities year to year.
Thank you for all that. And I'm going to just talk about a number of issues, and then I'd like the board to weigh in if it wants. In the process, and I'm not expecting any response, I don't think, on any of these until after I'm done, but the somehow I'm sure that in the process the individual schools participates in the process. You didn't mention athletics, but I think that's a big part of the considerations. One of the things that I would think about is, and I don't want to be prescriptive in how to do it because I have respect for the process. I think that there may be other approaches. For instance, applying percentages to how much percent do we apply to athletics versus classrooms compared to IT or whatever. Another one that I know was bothersome earlier this year to at least two of our board members was that there was a change in priority for one of the facilities at North. And part of the challenge that I think board members encounter is that once it's on the 10-year plan, it really does appear to be a promise. And I know you've said it really isn't, but once it's there, it's really hard for us because then we have all these people saying, well, you said you're going to do it. Why didn't you? Well, we had priorities change. The other thing I wondered about was technology. You know, you've got a lot of people that work with you on all of these things, and you're trying to figure it out. And I was wondering today about a certain way to operate a valve, because it was new to me. And I thought, I wonder if we're doing that. And I was just wondering how far along you think we are in technology when we adopt something. You know, like our cameras. We spend a lot of money on cameras. We spend a lot of money on IT. And are we pretty current in being up to date, or do we stay behind to make sure that stuff is well vetted and used before we get there? So I don't mean you to answer that right now. That was just some of the areas I wanted to bring up in terms of the process. You could answer, and if you want, otherwise I'll open it up for discussion, and maybe that's it.
There were a couple of things that you prompted me that I probably should reply to. The schools do participate. We ask periodically principals for their priorities of what they think is necessary on their campuses, and so we solicit their input in the plan. Similar with athletics, the athletic directors from each of the high schools, as well as the district athletic director, and there are certain amounts of money on an annual basis allocated to athletics. Similarly, some years ago, the board allocated $2 million of SAVE and $500,000 of PEPL funds to classroom technology. And LIS achieved one-on-one, I think, the year before last. Now, the problem that Gary and his staff struggle with is maintaining that one-on-one, and of course other emerging technologies. As we have implemented we have over 1,000 security cameras. That was done over the past 3 years. The thing that I am concerned about is the ongoing maintenance, repair, replacement of those cameras, and the staff internally necessary to support those systems. And those are network devices. The cameras, our access controls are network devices. So these are all things that LIS has to maintain, care for, respond to work orders for, and we have not given LIS additional, and of course it's general fund, resources in order to support that, and that eventually will be demanded by the requirements of those systems. So yes, schools participate, athletics participates, and there has been an ongoing commitment to technology in the classroom. We are also there's an ongoing commitment to our building automation systems, which also now in some, we haven't invested in this building. It still has original 60s pneumatic controls, but all of our schools have some level of direct digital control building automation. There's still some pneumatics out in the schools. We have an ongoing program to upgrade the technology for building controls, lighting controls, mechanical system controls, and so forth in our buildings. But we have a big investment ongoing to maintain and upgrade our building automation systems, and that is directly related, of course, to our energy efficiency.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or questions? If not, I've got just two more then. You didn't address the 8-year versus 10-year. Could we just squeeze the 10-year plan down to 8 years so we don't show those last 2 years that are out so far?
Easy.
Easy, okay. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but I would sure want to consider that. And the last thing on the long-range plan, when you show a dollar amount for a project, that's pretty much just the capital cost, right?
That is intended to represent the entire cost of the implementation of that project.
Of that project.
If it includes furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that's included in that
Okay.
budget. That includes design fees, it's supposed to be the grand total, our best estimate at the
Okay.
time the estimate is prepared.
Okay, so it does include architect fees?
Yes, it is
Okay.
the project cost, not
Right.
the construction cost.
Okay. And then I think you determine the operating cost also on a periodic basis, like a per year or something, right?
Yes, there are studies on almost every project of what are the energy impacts, increases or decreases,
Right.
that will be achieved by the implementation of that project.
So
We predicted, for example, what would be the cost of the additional auditorium and pool
Right.
for utilities, for custodial,
Right.
ongoing life cycle cost stuff.
Okay, life cycle. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to put that into the 10-year or 8-year plan, whatever it is, so that we could, when we make a decision on something, and it's $5 million, but it's going to cost us $1 million a year for $500,000 for energy and $500,000 for custodians or whatever. Is that just getting too busy to add that?
Those are all things that we take into consideration and account. And if it was the board's desire to see a better representation of the life cycle cost at the time of project approval, we would be able to do that. It would add some bulk to ordinarily it's a 1-page or so memo that
Right.
you get that says, here's what the project, the scope is this, and the budget is that. It would become 2 pages, 3 pages if we went into that level of detail. From time to time, we have forwarded to the board, and for example, the West High School energy assessment that now is something over a year ago is 70, 80 pages. We provided to the board because it wasn't accounting for each of those energy efficiency measure projects, of which you approved 16 and 17 or 14, 17, something like that this evening. And it described in detail what the cost of implementation of each of those energy efficiency measures were and what the projected energy savings were and so forth. We don't do that on every project. That was driven by a Mid-American Energy program, that particular report. But we do a similar analysis on every project of if we're going to add square footage, it's going to be heated and cooled and ventilated and so forth, and it's going to have custodial support and so forth. We could expand on all of that at the time of the initial approval of the project, I think would be the time. So at the very first time you approve a project, you have the best possible understanding of what the grand total life cycle cost would be. We could do that. It's a little more work, of course, on our part, and it adds a little more bulk to what goes into your agenda for you to spend your time reading.
And I understand that. I was thinking about it from the perspective of preparing a proposal for a company, and if most of us, if we were going to prepare a proposal for a company, we would want to include those because the company would be going, well, am I going to save money or is it going to cost me money? And I'm not asking for anything more than a couple of cells. If it's still a line item and it's going to cost $1 million and just a ballpark on the average yearly energy delta, maybe you're going to decrease as you have in some of yours, and we're going to decrease our energy cost by $80,000 a year, and we're going to increase our labor costs by $150,000. Anyway, I would support that kind of approach, not 79 pages of additional information, but a swag at what those numbers might be. That's all I'm going to say, Director DeSalvo.
I'm sorry, I thought of a couple things. So at the bottom of page 2 of the 10-year plan, there's program contingency, but it's only listed in a couple of columns, and I think there would be program contingency forever?
It's listed in a couple of columns there because those are years when there were funds available to take
To pay
that
the
amount in that
contingency.
particular year, but it
Okay.
would accumulate moving forward.
Okay.
We were trying to build up, I think, something 2 million or so should be available in
that.
SAVE
Okay.
as unprogrammed contingency, and we're trying to build that up. So if you see 250,000 in one year, 250,000 in a different year, that's accumulating that amount in that particular year and then letting that build up.
It's only in 2 columns, so it must have stopped after certain projects or something.
That's because we have a desire to buy so many other things.
Then there's a debt service payment. What does that mean?
That is the repayment of the bonds that were sold for Central High School, and that the first increment of that will fall off here in another 5 years or so, and the second increment
Right.
will fall off the following year, and that money will then become available for projects
Okay.
or for additional bonding should you choose to do something else of
That
larger
magnitude.
cost.
Okay. Technology plus any carryover?
The technology funds carry over, the unspent funds in the technology line items carry over year to year. Some other line items go back to their, whatever their annual allocation is year to year. The technology, if there's unspent funds in technology, it carries over to the following year.
Okay. And can only be used for technology.
It can only be used for technology.
Total budget, then estimated annual revenue, so you kind of have, I think, where Ralph was going. Carryover is something of interest to me too, that I look a lot at that line item, so. And I know, we've talked about before totals, this way and that way, if possible. But if we could just access the spreadsheet to be able to edit it on our own, then that would be great, and I could probably fumble my way through it, but, thank you.
Director Beck.
Along those lines, the estimated annual revenue, can you explain where exactly that number comes from? Because I notice it's the same for all 10 years of the plan.
Yes, and it varies a little bit year to year. We get an estimate annually from the state of what projected SAVE revenues will be, and the PEPL is, of course, a local property tax levy, and it will vary year to year. The rate doesn't vary so much as the total tax base might vary year to year, and that's a little less than 5 million in PEPL. And I think a little less than 15 million in SAVE. And those, as I say, vary year to year. A couple of years ago, SAVE came in substantially less than we had projected. But it's based on a projected provided by the state.
Okay, so we just kind of keep it at a level amount, and it should come out in the wash if some years it goes down a little and other years it goes up a little.
Yes, we've attempted in the long-range plan spreadsheet always to be conservative and to not overestimate our available resources.
Anybody else? Director Gosa, you have anything?
Not really.
Okay. All right, if there's no additional discussion, we will close this and we'll move on. Are there any administrative reports? Are there any board requests? Okay. Thank you. Director Mayfield, were you going to?
On board request, I had a request 2 meetings ago, and I have not received it directly. Maybe it's in the mail, but I had requested some information on juvenile courts and how we were partnering as far as expense, and I'd asked for how many clients were in the program.
And those were written requests?
Yes, it was.
So
It should be recorded.
and excuse me?
And they said they would have it at the next meeting, which has passed.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a specific, the agenda committee tries to get to all of these requests in a timely manner. But I hope the expectation isn't there by any of us that a request will be responded to like at the next meeting or anything like that.
You may have misunderstood me. It was just information that I was asking for on a printed sheet. It
Right.
didn't have to be presented as.
No, I understand, but sometimes it takes the administration a while to prepare that. And so noting that it occurred at some point and the agenda committee will take it up and see if there's a reason that it hasn't been responded to. Okay?
Okay,
I
well, I
don't
was
know.
asked when I wanted it, and so that's why I
Oh.
said next meeting.
I
And they said,
understand.
okay, so just responding to what I was told, that's all.
Again, I mean, oftentimes, like on this one, it says as soon as possible. So I just want to advise all of us that the administration and the agenda committee tries to respond to these requests in as timely manner as possible. Okay?
So shall I ask again in a couple of weeks or a month?
No, you reminded the agenda committee and the administration tonight that you haven't received the information, and it'll be dealt with by the agenda committee at the next agenda committee meeting.
May I ask?
Well,
I'm not quite understanding how it's an agenda matter when it's just a matter of information, which
Okay.
is recorded, and he said all he has to do is get it and he would have the next meeting. Now, I'm not worried about the next meeting, but why is it an agenda?
So what I'd recommend is that if you would want to review the agenda committee procedure that you requested in a board request, and that every single one of these goes to the agenda committee, the superintendent will look at these if it is an information request, and the administration can go ahead and handle it. They take care of it. But the agenda committee is responsible for this. So again, if you want to revise the way the committee works or request it.
No, I'm just trying to
but
get
this-
clarity.
But this is not the proper place for that.
Yeah, just
Okay.
trying to get some clarity, that's all. If I don't ask, I won't know.
I understand. Well, I'm going to continue on. Are there any other board requests except for this one? Okay, we have one from Director Beck dated today. It's an information request. Description of the request, given the concerns of many parents about later start times, I'd like to know if there's a possibility to expand stepping stones to more locations, including and especially the middle schools. Why are you requesting this information? Having some structured, safe work or reading time would allow parents to drop off children earlier using stepping stones, which is fee-based and separately federally funded, would alleviate costs to the district. Additionally, parents with children at elementary and middle schools with divergent start times would be able to consolidate drop-offs. Is there a second?
Second.
And when would you like this information? As soon as possible. Okay. Or feasible. I'll put it in here. Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.